The morning started like any other in the small town of Millfield, but for 16-year-old Lucy, it would be the last normal moment of her old life. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to find something that would fit without making her father angry. Every piece of clothing seemed to highlight what he constantly reminded her was wrong with her body. "Lucy, get down here now." Her father's voice boomed from downstairs, carrying that familiar edge that made her stomach twist. With worry, she quickly grabbed a loose sweater and hurried down the creaky wooden stairs of their rundown house. The living room was a mess of empty beer bottles and cigarette butts. Her father sat hunched over the kitchen table, his face red and sweaty. Papers were scattered everywhere, and she could see past due notices mixed in with what looked like betting slips. This had become a common sight over the past few months. "Dad, is everything okay?" Lucy asked softly, trying not to upset him further. She had learned to walk on eggshells around him, especially when he looked distressed. He looked up at her with bloodshot eyes, and she saw something different there today, something that scared her more than his usual anger. It was a cold, calculating look, like he was solving a problem in his head. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." Lucy's heart started beating faster. These talks never ended well for her. Usually they involved him blaming her for their money problems or criticizing her appearance. She sat down carefully, keeping her hands folded in her lap. "You know how much trouble we're in," he started, gesturing at the pile of bills. "The bank's gonna take the house. I owe money to some very dangerous people. And it's all because I've been spending money feeding you and keeping a roof over your head." Lucy felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Dad, I can get a job, I can help. I've been looking everywhere, but most places won't hire someone my age." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Who's gonna hire you? Look at yourself. You can't even take care of your own body. How are you gonna take care of anything else?" The words hit her like physical blows. She had heard variations of this speech hundreds of times, but today felt different. Today felt final. "I've found a solution," he continued, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from his shirt pocket. "There's a man who lives up in the mountains. He's looking for someone to help around his place. He's willing to pay good money for the right person." Lucy felt confused. "You mean like a job? But I thought you said nobody would hire me." Her father's face hardened. "It's not exactly a job, Lucy. It's more like a permanent arrangement." The room went silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Lucy tried to understand what he was saying, but her mind couldn't quite grasp it. "What do you mean, permanent?" she whispered. "I mean you're going to go live with him. He's going to take care of you from now on. And in return he's giving me enough money to solve all my problems." The truth hit her like a truck. Her own father was selling her. Actually selling her to a stranger like she was property. She felt dizzy and had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. "Dad, no. Please, I'll do anything. I'll lose weight. I'll find a way to make money. Please don't do this." The words came out in a rush, desperate and broken, but he had already made up his mind. "It's done, Lucy. He's coming to pick you up in an hour. Go pack whatever you can fit in one bag." Lucy ran upstairs, her legs shaking so badly she could barely climb the steps. In her small bedroom, she threw random clothes into an old backpack, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed the few photos she had of her mother, who had died when Lucy was 12. Her mother would have never let this happen, as she packed. She could hear her father on the phone downstairs, talking in low, urgent tones. She caught fragments of conversation about debt collectors and final warnings. The reality of their situation was worse than she had imagined. An hour later, she heard a truck pull up outside. Through her bedroom window, she saw an old pickup truck covered in mud. A tall man with a thick beard got out and walked toward their front door. He was wearing work clothes and looked like he spent a lot of time outdoors. "Lucy, he's here!" Her father called up the stairs. With trembling hands, she picked up her backpack and walked downstairs one last time. The bearded man was standing in their living room, looking around with an expression she couldn't read. When he saw her, his eyes were neither kind nor cruel. They were just ... "This is her father said, his voice businesslike now. "She's 16, healthy, and she'd do whatever you need her to do." The man nodded and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out an envelope. Lucy watched in horror as her father counted the money inside. $500. That's what her life was worth to him. "Get your things," the man said to Lucy. His voice was deep but not threatening. "We have a long drive ahead of us." Lucy looked at her father one last time, hoping to see some sign of regret or love. Instead, he was already walking toward the kitchen, probably to make a phone call to his bookies. "I hate you," she whispered. But he didn't even turn around. The bearded man waited patiently by the door while Lucy gathered her courage. She had two choices: run away and try to survive on her own, or go with this stranger and face whatever awaited her in the mountains. The man seemed to sense her hesitation. "It's time to go," he said, not unkindly but firmly. Lucy followed him outside to his truck. As they drove through the familiar streets of her hometown, she pressed her face against the window, watching everything she had ever known disappear behind them. Neighbors she had grown up with, the school she attended, the small market where she sometimes bought candy with spare change. As they left the town limits and headed toward the mountains, Lucy felt like she was leaving the world entirely. The road became narrower and windier with each mile. Trees grew thicker and taller on both sides, blocking out most of the sunlight. "Where are we going?" she finally managed to ask. "Home," the man replied simply, but home to Lucy meant the place she had just left, even if it hadn't felt like home in a long time. This felt like she was being taken to another planet, somewhere far away from everything and everyone she had ever known. The truck climbed higher into the mountains, and Lucy wondered if anyone would ever see her again. The truck finally stopped after what felt like hours of driving through winding mountain roads. Lucy had been preparing herself for the worst during the entire journey. Every scary movie she had ever seen about isolated mountain cabins flashed through her mind. She imagined a dirty, run-down shack with boarded windows and maybe chains hanging from the walls. When the bearded man turned off the engine, Lucy's heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. She looked out the window and blinked in. Confusion. This wasn't what she had expected at all. The cabin in front of her was beautiful. It was made of warm, honey-colored wood with a wraparound porch decorated with hanging flower baskets. The yard was neat and well-maintained, with a vegetable garden on one side and what looked like fruit trees on the other. Smoke was coming from the chimney, making the whole scene look like something from a postcard. "This is it," the man said, getting out of the truck. "Come on." Lucy grabbed her backpack with shaking hands and followed him up the stone path to the front door. She noticed that the porch had comfortable-looking rocking chairs and a small table with a chess set on it. This definitely wasn't the scary place she had imagined. The man opened the front door and gestured for her to go inside first. Lucy stepped through the doorway and gasped. The inside of the cabin was even more surprising than the outside. The main room had high ceilings with exposed wooden beams. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a crackling fire that filled the space with warmth and light. Comfortable furniture was arranged around the fireplace, and every surface seemed to be covered with books. There were bookshelves from floor to ceiling on two walls, packed with everything from classic novels to modern science books. But what really caught her attention were the paintings. Beautiful landscape paintings hung on the walls, showing mountain scenes and forest paths. In one corner of the room there was an easel with a half-finished painting of a sunset over the mountains. "You paint?" Lucy asked without thinking, then immediately regretted speaking. The man nodded. "It helps me relax. Do you like art?" Lucy was surprised by the question. Nobody had ever asked her what she liked before. I used to draw sometimes, before what? Before my dad said it was a waste of time and I should focus on more important things. The man's expression darkened for a moment, but then he shook his head. "Well, you're not there anymore. Come on, let me show you to your room." Lucy followed him down a short hallway. He opened a door and stepped aside to let her look in. Lucy's mouth fell open. The room was perfect. It had a comfortable-looking bed with a colorful quilt, a desk by the window, and its own small bookshelf. The walls were painted a soft blue color, and there were curtains with tiny flowers on them. "This is for me?" Lucy whispered. "Of course, you'll need a place to sleep and do your schoolwork." "Schoolwork?" Lucy was confused. My father said I was here to work for you." The man sat down in a chair by the desk and gestured for Lucy to sit on the bed. "We need to talk. My name is Daniel, and there are some things you need to know about why you're really here." Lucy sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, still not trusting the situation. Nothing was making sense. Where were the chains? Where was the scary dungeon? Why was this man being so nice to her? "First of all," Daniel continued, "you're safe here. I know this whole situation is confusing and scary, but I need you to understand that I'm not going to hurt you. Ever." Lucy stared at him, trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. "Then why did you buy me from my father?" Daniel's face showed a mixture of anger and sadness. "Because someone needed to get you away from him before he did something even worse. I've been watching your situation for a while, Lucy." "Watching me? How?" "I used to work for the state as a social worker. Part of my job was to investigate reports of child abuse and neglect. Your name came across my desk several times over the past 2 years. Lucy felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had hoped nobody knew about what went on in her house. "Someone reported my dad?" "Teachers, mostly. They noticed bruises sometimes, and they were concerned about your weight loss and then weight gain. But every time we tried to investigate, your father would clean up his act just long enough to convince the authorities that everything was fine." Lucy remembered those visits from the serious-looking people in suits. Her father had always warned her to keep her mouth shut and act normal, or things would get much worse for both of them. "I kept track of your family even after I left social services," Daniel continued. "When I heard through some contacts that your father was planning to sell you to pay off his gambling debts, I knew I had to act fast." "So you bought me to save me?" Lucy asked, still not quite believing it. "I bought you to get you away from him legally. The money doesn't matter to me, but it mattered to him. Now you're here and you're safe." Lucy felt tears starting to form. In her eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of relief. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get to be a normal teenager. You'll go to school in town, you'll help me around here with some basic chores, and you'll have time to do things you enjoy. Like drawing if you want to." "School? But I thought ... You thought what?" "That you'd be locked up here forever?" Daniel smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Lucy, you're not a prisoner. You're not my property. You're a kid who needed help, and now you're getting it." Lucy looked around the beautiful room again, then back at Daniel. "I don't understand why you're being so nice to me. My father always said nobody would ever want me around because I'm fat and ugly and useless." Daniel's expression became very serious. "Your father was wrong about a lot of things, Lucy. You're not any of those things. You're a person who deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. But look at me," Lucy said, gesturing at her body. "I'm huge. I can't even fit into normal clothes anymore." "Do you know why you gained so much weight?" Daniel asked gently. Lucy shrugged. "Because I eat too much, I guess. Or because you were stressed and unhappy and food was the only comfort you could find. When people feel unsafe and unloved, sometimes eating is the only way they know how to make themselves feel better, even for a little while." Lucy had never thought about it that way before. She had just accepted her father's explanation that she was greedy and had no self-control. "The good news," Daniel continued, "is that when people feel safe and cared for, their bodies usually find their natural, healthy size all by themselves. No dieting, no punishment, just good food and a peaceful life." "You really think that could happen for me?" "I've seen it happen many times. But more importantly, Lucy, your worth as a person has nothing to do with what you weigh. Nothing at all." Lucy felt something inside her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It took her a moment to recognize what it was. Hope. The next morning, Lucy woke up in the most comfortable bed she had ever slept in. For a moment, she forgot where she was and expected to hear her father yelling at her to get up and make breakfast. Instead, she heard birds singing outside her window and smelled something delicious cooking downstairs. She sat up slowly, looking around the beautiful blue room in the morning light. Everything from the night before came flooding back to her. The truck ride, the surprising cabin, Daniel's shocking revelation about being a social worker. Part of her wondered if it had all been a dream. A gentle knock on her door made her jump. "Lucy, are you awake?" Daniel's voice called from the hallway. "Yes," she called back, quickly trying to smooth down her messy hair. "Breakfast is ready when you are. Take your time." Lucy got dressed in the same clothes from yesterday and made her way downstairs. The smell of pancakes and bacon filled the air, making her stomach growl loudly. When was the last time she had eaten a real breakfast? Daniel was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes like he did this every day. The kitchen was just as nice as the rest of the house, with wooden cabinets and a big window that looked out over the mountains. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "How did you sleep?" "Really good," Lucy admitted. "That bed is so comfortable. I've never slept in anything like it." Daniel's smile faded a bit. "What kind of bed did you have at home?" "Just a mattress on the floor. My dad sold my bed frame last year to pay for something." Lucy immediately regretted sharing this information. She was used to keeping family secrets. "Well, that bed is yours now," Daniel said firmly. "Along with everything else in that room." He placed a plate in front of her with 3 fluffy pancakes, 2 strips of bacon, and fresh strawberries on the side. Lucy stared at the food in amazement. It looked like something from a restaurant. "This is too much," she said. "I can't eat all this." "Why not?" "I'm trying to lose weight. My dad always said I needed to eat less." Daniel sat down across from her with his own plate. "Lucy, can I tell you something? You're a growing teenager. Your body needs good food to be healthy. There's nothing wrong with eating when you're hungry." Lucy picked up her fork hesitantly. The pancakes were incredible, light and fluffy with real maple syrup. She hadn't tasted anything this good in years. "I have something to show you after breakfast," Daniel said. "Some papers that will help you understand your situation better." After they finished eating, Daniel led her to a small office area near the living room. He pulled out a manila folder and opened it on the desk. "These are copies of all the reports that were filed about your home situation," he said. "I want you to see them so you understand that what happened to you wasn't normal and it wasn't your fault." Lucy looked at the papers with growing shock. There were incident reports from her school, notes from guidance counselors, and even a report from a neighbor who had called the police about loud arguing and sounds of violence coming from her house. "Mrs. Peterson called the police?" Lucy asked, recognizing the neighbor's name. "Several times. She was worried about you." Lucy felt a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. She had always thought nobody cared what happened to her. "Here's the most important document," Daniel said, pulling out an official-looking paper. "This is a temporary guardianship order. It means that legally I'm responsible for your care and safety now." "How did you get this?" "I still have contacts in the system. When I heard what your father was planning, I worked with a judge I know to get emergency custody. The money I gave your father was just to make sure he wouldn't fight it." Lucy read through the document, trying to understand all the legal language, "So I don't have to go back to him." "Not unless you want to. And from what I can see, that wouldn't be safe for you anyway." Daniel pulled out another folder. "This is my background. Check in all my credentials. I want you to see everything so you know you can trust me." Lucy looked through certificates showing Daniel's education and work history. He had a degree in social work and had worked for the state for 15 years before moving to the mountains. There were letters of recommendation from judges, other social workers, and families he had helped. "Why did you leave social work?" Lucy asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I got burned out. I saw too many kids who needed help but couldn't get it because of bureaucracy and politics. I saved some money and moved up here to paint and think about what to do next. And then you heard about me. And then I heard about you." I couldn't just sit here knowing a child was in danger when I had the power to help. Lucy felt overwhelmed by all this information. But why me? There must be lots of kids who need help. You're right, there are. But your case was special because I had been following it for so long. I felt responsible, like I had failed you when I was still working for the state. A thought occurred to Lucy. What about school? My dad pulled me out last month because he said it was a waste of time. You'll be going back to school. There's a good high school in town, about 20 minutes down the mountain. I've already spoken to the principal about your situation. What did you tell them? Just that you're my ward now and you've had some difficulties at home. They don't need to know all the details. Lucy felt nervous about starting at a new school where she didn't know anyone. What if the other kids are mean to me? Some might be. Teenagers can be cruel sometimes. But you're stronger than you think, Lucy. You survived living with your father for 16 years. You can handle high school. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. There's someone I want you to meet. She lives about a quarter mile down the road. Another person lives up here. Her name is Helen. She's 78 years old and she's been my neighbor for the past 3 years. She's the one who suggested I reach out to you. She knows about me. I tell Helen most things. She's like the grandmother I never had. She's also the one who helped me understand how to set up the legal guardianship. Lucy felt curious about this mysterious neighbor. What's she like? You'll see. She's expecting us for lunch. As they walked down a wooded path to Helen's house, Lucy felt nervous. What if this old woman didn't like her? What if she thought Lucy was fat and ugly like her father always said? Helen's house was smaller than Daniel's, but just as cozy. It was painted bright yellow with white shutters and had a garden full of vegetables and flowers. Before they could knock, the door opened and a small, energetic woman with silver hair came out. She was wearing a purple sweater and had the kindest eyes Lucy had ever seen. You must be Lucy, Helen said warmly. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Nice to meet you, Lucy said quietly. Oh, honey, you don't need to be shy with me. I've been waiting for Daniel to bring home a young person to live up this mountain. It gets pretty quiet up here with just us old folks. Helen's house smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. The three of them sat at her kitchen table and ate homemade soup and sandwiches while Helen asked Lucy gentle questions about her interests and dreams. Daniel tells me you like to draw, Helen said. I used to. I'm not very good at it. Nonsense. Art isn't about being good or bad. It's about expressing what's inside you. I have some art supplies you might like to try. After lunch, Helen showed Lucy a closet full of art materials. Paints, colored pencils, sketchbooks, and canvases. My late husband was an artist, Helen explained. I've been hoping someone would come along who could use these supplies. Lucy picked up a set of colored pencils, feeling their weight in her hands. It had been so long since she had drawn anything. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Helen said with a wink. Wait until you see what you can create. Walking back to Daniel's house with a bag full of art supplies, Lucy felt something she had never experienced before. She felt like she belonged somewhere. 3 weeks had passed since Lucy arrived at the mountain cabin, and she was starting to believe that this new life might actually be real. Every morning, she woke up expecting to find herself back in her father's house, but instead she was greeted by sunlight streaming through her, flowered curtains and the smell of Daniel's coffee brewing downstairs. The routine they had developed felt natural and comfortable. Daniel would make breakfast while Lucy got ready for the day. After eating, they would spend the morning working together on various tasks around the property. Lucy had been surprised to discover that she actually enjoyed the physical work. Can you help me fix this fence post? Daniel asked one morning, pointing to a wooden post that had come loose near the vegetable garden. Lucy nodded and followed him to the tool shed. A month ago, she would have been terrified to be alone with a man holding tools. But Daniel had never raised his voice at her, never made her feel stupid, and never commented on her appearance except to make sure she was warm enough or had enough to eat. As they worked together to dig out the old post and set a new one, Lucy realized something amazing was happening. She wasn't out of breath like she used to be. The work felt good instead of exhausting. "You're getting stronger," Daniel observed, watching her lift a heavy rock to brace the post. "I feel different," Lucy admitted. "Like my body actually works." Now, that's what happens when you eat regular meals and get enough sleep. Your body remembers how to be healthy. Lucy thought about this as they continued working. At her father's house, she had either been starving because there wasn't enough food, or stuffing herself with junk food when he brought home fast food after a good day at the track. She never ate vegetables because they didn't have any, and she never exercised because she was always too tired or depressed. Here on the mountain, she ate 3 meals a day of real food. Daniel cooked simple things like grilled chicken with vegetables from the garden or homemade soup with fresh bread. Lucy had been nervous about eating so much at first, convinced she would gain even more weight. Instead, something incredible was happening. Her clothes were getting looser. Not because she was starving herself, but because her body was finding its natural size when it was properly nourished and cared for. "Daniel," she said as they finished with the fence, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Were you ever fat when you were a kid?" Daniel smiled. "No, but my little sister was. That's actually part of why I became a social worker." "What happened to her?" "She went through something similar to what you experienced. My parents fought a lot, and food was the only thing that made her feel better. Kids at school were cruel to her about her weight, which made everything worse." "Did she get better?" "She did. It took time, and it took getting away from the chaos at home. But she learned to love herself and take care of herself. She's married now with 2 kids of her own." Lucy felt a spark of hope. "Do you think I'll be okay too?" "I know you will be. You're already doing great." After lunch, Daniel suggested they take a walk through the forest. These had become Lucy's favorite part of the day. The mountain air was clean and fresh, and the trees provided shade from the afternoon sun. "Look," Daniel said, pointing to a deer standing about 50 feet away. The deer looked at them curiously for a moment before bounding away into the thick trees. "I've never seen a deer in real life before," Lucy said in wonder. "There are lots of them up here." "Bears too, but they usually stay away from people." "Bears?" Lucy felt a little nervous. "Don't worry. I've lived here 3 years and only seen one, and it ran away as soon as it saw me. They're more afraid of us than we are of them." As they walked along a narrow trail, Daniel pointed out different plants and trees. He seemed to know everything about the forest and was happy to share his knowledge. "That's wild mint," he said, showing her a plant with small serrated leaves. "You can make tea with it. And those are blackberry bushes. They'll have fruit in a few weeks." "How do you know all this?" "Helen taught me most of it. Before that, I was a city kid who thought food came from grocery stores. Living up here has taught me a lot about taking care of myself." They came to a clearing with a small stream running through it. Daniel sat down on a fallen log and gestured for Lucy to join him. "This is my favorite spot," he said. "I come here when I need to think." Lucy sat beside him and listened to the water bubbling over the rocks. It was the most peaceful sound she had ever heard. "Daniel, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I've been having dreams about my mom." "I hadn't dreamed about her in years, but since I've been here, I dream about her almost every night." "What kind of dreams?" "Good ones." We're talking and laughing. Together, in the dreams, she tells me she's proud of me and that everything is going to be okay. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Your mother died when you were 12? "Cancer. She was sick for a long time. My dad was different when she was alive. He was still mean sometimes, but not like he became after she died." "Grief can make people do terrible things. That doesn't excuse what he did to you, but it might explain some of it." "I think my mom would like you," Lucy said suddenly. "She always said I should find people who are kind to me. I think I would have liked her too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow over the smooth stones. Lucy felt something inside her chest that she was still learning to recognize. Peace. "I want to show you something," Daniel said, standing up. "But we need to climb a little higher." They followed the stream uphill for about 10 minutes until they came to a small waterfall. The water cascaded down about 15 feet into a pool surrounded by moss-covered rocks. "It's beautiful," Lucy breathed. "This is where I come when I need to remember that the world still has magic in it." Lucy understood exactly what he meant. After years of living in ugliness and fear, she had forgotten that beautiful places existed. "Can I paint this sometime?" she asked. Since Helen had given her the art supplies, Lucy had been drawing and painting every evening. She wasn't very good yet, but she was improving, of course. "I think your mom would love to see you creating beautiful things." On the walk back to the cabin, Lucy realized that she had been thinking about her mother more since coming to the mountain. Not with the crushing sadness that used to overwhelm her, but with warm memories of the love they had shared. "Daniel, do you think people can watch over us after they die?" "I don't know for sure, but I think love is stronger than death. The love your mother had for you doesn't just disappear because she's gone." That evening, as Lucy sat at the kitchen table, working on a drawing of the waterfall, she felt her mother's presence more strongly than ever. It was as if her mom was looking over her shoulder, smiling at the picture taking shape under Lucy's colored pencils. "That's really good," Daniel said, looking at her drawing as he cleaned up the dinner dishes. "You're getting better every day." "I feel like I'm remembering who I used to be," Lucy said, "before everything got so bad." "You're not going backwards, Lucy. You're moving forward to who you're meant to be." As Lucy climbed the stairs to her room that night, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't immediately look away in shame. The face looking back at her was still round, but it was healthier now. Her skin was clearer, her eyes were brighter, and there was something else there too. Hope. Her reflection showed a girl who was beginning to believe in herself again. 2 months into her new life, Lucy sat at the kitchen table staring at a blank piece of paper. Daniel had suggested she try writing down some of her thoughts and experiences, but she couldn't figure out where to start. "How do you write about a life that felt like it was just beginning at 16 years old? Having trouble?" Daniel asked, setting down a cup of hot chocolate next to her elbow. "I don't know what to write about," Lucy admitted. "You said writing might help me process everything that's happened, but I don't even know how to begin." "Why? Don't you start with something simple? Maybe describe what your typical day looks like now compared to before." Lucy picked up her pen and wrote the first thing that came to mind. "I wake up every morning and nobody yells at me." Once she started, the words seemed to flow out of her like water from a broken dam. She wrote about the comfortable bed, the smell of real breakfast cooking, the feeling of safety that still surprised her every day. She wrote about Daniel's patience when she made mistakes, and Helen's warm hugs that made her feel like she mattered to someone. An hour later, she looked up to find Daniel reading in his chair by the fireplace. "I wrote 3 pages, she said. "Amazed. That's wonderful. How did it feel?" "Like I was talking to someone who actually wanted to listen." "Would you like to share any of it?" Lucy hesitated. She had written some very personal things about her father and her fears, but something about Daniel's gentle expression made her feel safe. "I wrote about the first time you made me pancakes," she said. "I wrote about how I couldn't believe someone would make food just for me without wanting something in return." Daniel's eyes grew sad. "You should never have to feel grateful for basic kindness, Lucy. But I do feel grateful every single day. That shows what a good heart you have. But I want you to understand that you deserve kindness. Not because you've earned it or because you're grateful for it, but because you're a human being." This was still a difficult concept for Lucy to accept. Her father had always made it clear that she was a burden, someone who took more than she gave. But here on the mountain, she was discovering talents and interests she never knew she had. The next week, Daniel came home from town with a surprise. He set a small laptop computer on the kitchen table and grinned at Lucy's shocked expression. "This is for me?" she asked. "It's used, but it works perfectly. I thought you might like to try typing your stories instead of writing them by hand." Lucy had never owned a computer before. Her father had said they were too expensive, and she was too stupid to learn how to use one anyway. But Daniel patiently spent the afternoon teaching her the basics. See, you click here to open a new document, and then you can just start typing. Lucy placed her fingers on the keyboard and slowly typed her name. Seeing it appear on the screen felt like magic. I can really keep this? It's yours. I also signed you up for a library card in town. They have free internet, and you can check out books about writing if you're interested. That evening, Lucy typed up the story she had written about her first breakfast at the cabin. As she worked, she found herself adding details and descriptions she hadn't included in the handwritten version. The words seemed to come easier when she was typing. When she finished, she had written 5 pages about something as simple as pancakes and bacon. But it wasn't really about the food. It was about the moment she first realized that someone cared whether she was hungry or not. Daniel, can you read this? She asked nervously. He took the laptop and read silently for several minutes. Lucy watched his face, trying to guess what he was thinking. This is really good, Lucy, he said finally. You have a gift for making the reader feel what you felt. You're just being nice. I'm not. I've read a lot of books in my life, and this reminds me of some of the best memoirs I've ever read. You have a natural voice for storytelling. Lucy felt a warm glow in her chest. Nobody had ever told her she was good at anything before. Over the following weeks, Lucy found herself writing every day. She wrote about her memories of her mother, about the scary drive up the mountain, about her first encounter with Helen. Each story seemed to help her understand her own experiences better. I think I want to write about my father, she told Daniel. One morning over breakfast. That might be difficult. Are you sure you're ready for that? I think so. But I want to try to understand why he became the way he was, not just write about how much he hurt me. Daniel nodded approvingly. That shows real maturity, Lucy. It's easier to paint people as completely good or completely evil, but most real people are more complicated than that. Lucy spent 3 days working on the story about her father. She wrote about the man he had been when her mother was alive, someone who sometimes took her fishing and taught her how to ride a bike. She wrote about how grief and gambling addiction had slowly eaten away at the good parts of him until only anger and desperation remained. I don't forgive him for what he did to me, she told Helen when they were working in the garden together. But I think I understand him a little better. Now, understanding doesn't mean forgiving, Helen said wisely, but it can help you make peace with your past. One afternoon, Daniel came home from town with more surprising news. I showed some of your writing to a friend of mine who teaches English at the high school, he said. She'd like to meet you. Lucy felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. What did? You tell her about me? Just that you're a talented young writer who's been homeschooled and might be interested in joining the school newspaper. The school newspaper? They publish student writing every month. Mrs. Rodriguez thinks you might like to submit something. Lucy had been dreading the idea of starting school, but the thought of seeing her writing in print was exciting. Could I really do that? Why not? You've written dozens of stories in the past month. Some of them are better than anything I read in professional magazines. That weekend, Helen suggested they have a writing party. She invited Lucy to bring her laptop over and read some of her stories out loud while Helen cooked dinner. I've never read my writing out loud before, Lucy said nervously. It's different from reading silently, Helen explained. You hear the rhythm of your words, and you can tell which parts work and which parts need improvement. Lucy chose her story about the waterfall to read first. As she spoke the words she had written, she could hear how they sounded to someone else. Some sentences flowed beautifully, while others felt clunky and awkward. That was beautiful, Helen said when Lucy finished. You painted such a clear picture that I felt like I was standing there with you. Really? Really, you have a gift, dear. And gifts are meant to be shared. The next morning, Lucy woke up with a new sense of purpose. She had always felt like she was just taking up space in the world, but maybe that wasn't true. Maybe she had something valuable to offer. She opened her laptop and started writing a new story. This one was about a girl who thought she was worthless until she discovered that her voice mattered. As she typed, Lucy realized she wasn't just writing fiction anymore. She was writing about herself, and for the first time in her life, it was a story worth telling. 3 months had passed since Lucy left her old life behind, and she was finally starting to feel like she belonged somewhere. She had been working on a story about mountain wildlife for the school newspaper when she heard the sound that made her blood run cold. A car engine struggling up the steep mountain road, sputtering and backfiring in a way that was painfully familiar. Lucy froze at the kitchen table, her fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard. She knew that sound. It was her father's old car. The one that barely ran and smelled like cigarettes and desperation. "Daniel," she called out, her voice shaking. "Someone's coming up the road." Daniel emerged from his workshop, wiping paint from his hands. He took one look at Lucy's terrified face and immediately understood. "Go to your room and stay there," he said firmly. "Lock the door. What if he tries to take me back?" "He can't. I have legal guardianship, remember? You're safe here." But Lucy didn't feel safe as she hurried upstairs and turned the lock on her bedroom door. Through her window, she watched the familiar beat-up sedan pull into the driveway. Her father got out, looking even worse than she remembered. His clothes were dirty and wrinkled, his face was unshaven, and he moved with the angry, jerky motions of someone who was desperate and possibly drunk. From her hiding spot upstairs, Lucy could hear voices outside. Her father's loud, aggressive tone was unmistakable, even though she couldn't make out the words. Daniel's voice was calmer but firm. The conversation grew louder and more heated. Lucy crept to the top of the stairs, staying hidden but trying to hear what was happening. "Where is she?" her father was shouting. "I know she's here. Lucy, get out here right now." "She's not going anywhere with you," Daniel replied calmly. "You sold her, remember? You took money and signed papers giving up your rights?" "That was temporary. I was just I needed time to get back on my feet. I'm her father." Being a father means protecting your child, not selling her to pay gambling debts. Lucy heard her father's voice get even louder and angrier. "You don't know anything about being a parent." "She's my daughter, and I want her back." "Why?" Daniel's voice was ice cold. "So you can abuse her some more? So you can blame her for your problems and make her feel worthless?" "I never abused anybody. I just tried to teach her some discipline." "Discipline?" Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "You called a 16-year-old girl fat and ugly every day. You blamed her for your financial problems. You made her sleep on a mattress on the floor while you spent money on gambling." Lucy found herself creeping down the stairs, drawn by a strange need to hear this confrontation. Her father had never been challenged by anyone before. He had always been the biggest, loudest person in any room. She needed to learn. Her father yelled, "The world's a tough place. I was preparing her. You were destroying her. Look, I know I made some mistakes, but I'm clean now. I haven't gambled in 2 months. I got a job at the factory. I can take care of her properly now." Lucy almost laughed at this lie. She had heard this speech before, usually right before Child Services came to investigate. Her father would clean up his act just long enough to fool the authorities, then go right back to his old ways. "Even if that were true," Daniel said, "Lucy doesn't want to go back. She's thriving here. She's healthy, she's happy, and she's discovering talents she never knew she had." "Talents?" Her father's voice was mocking. "What talents? The girl can barely tie her own shoes. She's a writer, a really good one. She's been accepted to contribute to the school newspaper." "Writing?" Her father laughed harshly. "That's not a real skill. That's just fantasy nonsense. She needs to learn practical things, like how to work and how not to be a burden on people." Lucy felt anger rising in her chest. How dare he dismiss something that had become so important to her? Writing had helped her heal, helped her understand herself, helped her feel like she had value. And he was calling it worthless, just like he had called her worthless. Before she could stop herself, Lucy found herself walking out onto the front porch. Both men turned to look at her, and she saw her father's face change from anger to something. That might have been relief. "Lucy, there you are, sweetheart. Come on, we're going home." The word sweetheart coming from his mouth made her feel sick. He had never called her anything but negative names when she lived with him. "This is my home now," Lucy said quietly. Her father's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. You belong with family." "Family doesn't sell their children," Lucy replied. Surprised by the strength in her own voice, I was desperate. I owed money to dangerous people. I thought this was temporary, just until I could get back on my feet. "You took money from me like I was a piece of furniture," Lucy said, feeling years of suppressed anger bubbling up inside her. "You told me I was worthless and ugly and stupid every single day. You blamed me for every bad thing that happened in your life. I was trying to motivate you. You were trying to make yourself feel better by making me feel worse." Her father stepped toward her, and Lucy instinctively moved closer to Daniel. That small movement seemed to enrage her father even more. "Look at you," he sneered. "You're still just as fat as ever. This guy's been filling your head with lies about how special you are, but the real world's gonna hit you hard. Nobody's gonna want a fat, lazy girl who thinks she's some kind of writer." "That's enough," Daniel said, stepping between Lucy and her father. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm not leaving without my daughter." "She's not your daughter anymore. You gave up that right when you sold her." Her father's face turned red with rage. "You can't keep her here forever. She get tired of playing house with you and want to come back to her real family." "I don't want to go back," Lucy said, loud enough for both men to hear clearly. "I never want to see you again." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Her father stared at her with a mixture of shock and fury. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "When this fantasy ends and reality sets in, you'll come crawling back." "But I might not want you then." "I'll take that chance," Lucy replied. Her father looked back and forth between Lucy and Daniel, realizing he had lost. Without another word, he stormed back to his car, slammed the door, and drove away with his engine backfiring and leaving a cloud of black smoke. Lucy stood on the porch, watching until the car disappeared around the bend. She felt shaky and drained, but also strangely proud. She had stood up to him. She had told him the truth about how he had treated her, and she had chosen her new life over going back to the old one. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked gently. "I think, so. I can't believe I actually said all that to him." "You were incredibly brave. I was terrified the whole time." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." That night, Lucy sat at her laptop and wrote about the confrontation. She wrote about the fear, the anger, and the strange sense of liberation that came from finally speaking her truth. As she typed, she realized that facing her father had been like closing a door on her past and walking through a new one into her future. She was no longer the scared, broken girl who had been sold to pay gambling debts. She was Lucy, writer and survivor, and she was finally free. 2 weeks after her father's unexpected visit, Lucy was in the middle of writing a story about forest animals when she heard another car coming up the mountain road. This time, however, the engine was quiet and well-maintained. Daniel looked out the window and his expression grew serious. "It's the social services department," he said calmly. "I was expecting this." Lucy felt her stomach drop. "Are they here to take me away?" "They're here to do an official evaluation. Your father called them and claimed I was keeping you here against your will." Lucy couldn't believe it, even after she had told him directly that she didn't want to go back. Her father was still trying to force her to return. "But that's not true. I know that, and you know that. Now we need to help them understand it too." 2 women in business suits got out of the official-looking sedan. Daniel went outside to greet them while Lucy watched nervously from the window. After a few minutes of conversation, Daniel came back inside with the 2 visitors. "Lucy, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Patterson and Miss Rodriguez from the Department of Children and Family Services," Daniel said. "They need to speak with you privately." The older woman, Mrs. Patterson, had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Rodriguez looked younger and carried a tablet for taking notes. Both women smiled at Lucy, but she could tell they were studying her carefully. "Hello, Lucy," Mrs. Patterson said gently. We're here because we received a complaint about your living situation. We need to ask you some questions to make sure you're safe and being cared for properly. Can Daniel stay? Lucy asked nervously. For now, we need to speak with you alone. But don't worry, this is just a conversation. Daniel squeezed Lucy's shoulder reassuringly. I'll be right outside if you need me. Just tell them the truth about everything. The social workers sat down at the kitchen table with Lucy, Miss Rodriguez, pulled out some official-looking papers while Mrs. Patterson leaned forward with a gentle expression. Lucy, we understand that your father brought you here several months ago. Can you tell us about your living situation before that? Lucy took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She talked about her father's gambling addiction, the verbal abuse, the lack of proper food or clothing. She described sleeping on a mattress on the floor and being blamed for every financial problem in the house. Your father claims that Mr. Daniel convinced you to stay here against your will, Miss Rodriguez said, looking up from her notes. He says you've been brainwashed into thinking you don't want to go home. That's ridiculous, Lucy said, feeling angry. Daniel saved me. My father sold me to pay his gambling debts. He took money for me like I was a piece of property. Mrs. Patterson exchanged a look with her colleague. Can you show us your living space here? Lucy led them upstairs to her bedroom. Both women looked around at the comfortable bed, the desk. By the window, the bookshelf full of books and the art supplies scattered around. This is all mine, Lucy explained. Daniel set this up before I even got here. And look. She showed them her laptop computer and some of her printed stories. I'm a writer now. I've been accepted to contribute to the school newspaper. You write? Miss Rodriguez asked, seeming genuinely interested every day. Writing helps me understand my feelings and experiences. Daniel encouraged me to start, and now it's the most important thing in my life. Mrs. Patterson picked up one of Lucy's stories and read the first few paragraphs. This is really good, Lucy. Very mature writing for someone your age. Thank you. My neighbor Helen says I have a gift. Tell us about Helen, Mrs. Patterson said. Lucy described her friendship with the elderly woman, how Helen had given her art supplies and encouraged her creativity. She talked about their afternoon conversations and how Helen made her feel valued and important. So you have a support system here? Miss Rodriguez asked. Yes, Daniel and Helen both care about me. They never make me feel bad about myself or blame me for things that aren't my fault. The social workers asked Lucy about her daily routine, her health, her plans for school, and her feelings about living on the mountain. Lucy answered every question honestly, describing how much better her life had become. Lucy, your father says, he's changed, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. He claims he's stopped gambling and gotten a job. He wants you to give him another chance. Lucy shook her head firmly. He said that before. He always cleans up his act when authorities get involved. But it never lasts. Besides, even if he had changed, I don't want to go back. I'm happy here. What if we required supervised visits? You could see your father regularly, but continue living here. I don't want to see him at all. He hurt me for years, and I'm finally healing from that. Being around him would just bring back all the pain and fear. After finishing their interview with Lucy, the social workers spent an hour talking privately with Daniel. Then they asked to speak with Helen, who invited them over for tea and homemade cookies. While the adults were talking, Lucy sat on the front porch feeling anxious. What if they decided Daniel wasn't suitable as a guardian? What if they forced her to go back to her father or placed her in foster care with strangers? Helen returned with the social workers after an hour, and all three women were smiling. That had to be a good sign. Lucy, Mrs. Patterson said, sitting down beside her on the porch, we need to do some paperwork and background checks, but based on what we've seen today, we're recommending that you remain in Mr. Daniel's care. Lucy felt a wave of relief wash over her. Really? Really? Your living situation here is clearly beneficial to your well-being. You're healthy, happy, and thriving. Mr. Daniel has proper legal guardianship, excellent references, and a clean background check. Helen vouched for both of you enthusiastically. Miss Rodriguez nodded in agreement. We've seen a lot of difficult situations in our work, Lucy. This isn't one of them. You've found yourself a good home. What about my father? Lucy asked. We'll inform him of our decision. If he continues to cause problems, we can take legal action to prevent him from harassing you. That evening, Daniel made Lucy's favorite dinner of grilled salmon with vegetables from the garden. As they ate, he pulled out an official-looking document. I have something for you, he said, sliding the paper across the table. Lucy looked at the document and gasped. It was a permanent guardianship order with both their names on it. This makes it official, Daniel said. You're my ward until you turn 18, and even after that you'll always be family to me. Lucy felt tears of happiness welling up in her eyes. Family? The best kind of family? The kind you choose? Helen knocked on the door just then, carrying a chocolate cake she had baked to celebrate. I thought this occasion called for dessert, she said with a grin as the three of them sat around the kitchen table eating cake and talking about Lucy's plans for school. Lucy realized that this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not the tension and fear she had grown up with, but warmth and support and unconditional love. I want to write about this, Lucy said suddenly, about how families aren't always the people you're born with. Sometimes they're the people who choose to love you. That sounds like a beautiful story, Helen said. And an important one, Daniel added. Lots of kids need to hear that message. Lucy smiled, already composing the first sentences in her head. She had found her family, and now she wanted to help other kids find theirs too. 2 years had passed since that terrifying day when Lucy first arrived at the mountain cabin, and she barely recognized the person she had become. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror on graduation morning, she saw a confident young woman, with bright eyes and a genuine smile. The scared, broken 16-year-old who had been sold by her father seemed like a character from someone else's story. Lucy, your cap is crooked, Helen called from downstairs where she was busy making a special graduation breakfast. Lucy adjusted her graduation cap and laughed. At 18, she had grown into her body in a way that felt natural and healthy. She wasn't the skinny girl her father had demanded she become, but she wasn't the scared, overeating teenager either. She was simply herself, and that was enough. The smell of pancakes and bacon drifted upstairs, reminding her of that first morning in Daniel's kitchen when she couldn't believe someone would cook for her without wanting something in return. Now she knew that real love didn't come with conditions or payment plans. Coming, she called back, grabbing her graduation speech from the desk. As the valedictorian of her small mountain high school, she would be speaking to the graduating class about overcoming obstacles and finding your voice. The girl who once believed she was worthless now had something important to say to the world. Downstairs, Daniel was setting the table with their best dishes. He looked up as she entered the kitchen, and his eyes filled with pride. Look at you, he said softly. I can't believe you're graduating today. I can't believe you helped me get here, Lucy replied, giving him a hug. 2 years ago, I had given up on school completely. You did all the hard work. I just provided a safe place for you to do it. Helen bustled in from the kitchen carrying a platter of perfectly golden pancakes. At 80, she moved a little slower than before, but her energy and enthusiasm for life hadn't dimmed at all. Our girl is graduating, Helen announced, as if this was news to anyone in the room. I still remember when you first came here, so quiet and scared. Now look at you, giving speeches and winning scholarships. Lucy felt a warm glow of accomplishment. The scholarship to the state university had been a complete surprise. Her essay about healing from childhood trauma and finding her voice through writing had impressed the scholarship committee enough to offer her a full ride. I've been thinking about my speech, Lucy said as they sat down to eat. I want to talk about second chances, but not the kind people usually think about. What do you mean? Daniel asked. People always talk about giving someone else a second chance. But sometimes the most important thing is giving yourself a second chance. Believing that you deserve better than what you've had. That's beautiful, Helen said, reaching over to squeeze Lucy's hand. And so true. After breakfast, They drove down the mountain to the small high school where Lucy had spent the last 2 years. The building was decorated with banners and balloons, and families were arriving for the ceremony. Lucy thought back to her first day at the school. How terrified she had been that the other students would reject her. Some had been unkind, especially at first, but others had welcomed her, particularly after her first article was published in the school newspaper. That article, about a teenager finding hope after trauma, had been reprinted in the regional newspaper and then picked up by a national magazine focused on youth issues. Lucy still couldn't believe that her words had reached so many people. "Lucy!" a familiar voice called out across the parking lot. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, her English teacher and the advisor for the school newspaper. "I'm so proud of you." "Have you decided on your major yet?" "Social work with a minor in journalism," Lucy replied. "I want to help kids who are going through what I went through." "That's perfect. You'll be amazing at it." As students gathered in their caps and gowns, Lucy spotted Tommy, a shy sophomore who reminded her of herself 2 years ago. His parents were going through a messy divorce, and he had been staying after school to work on the newspaper just to avoid going home. "Hey, Tommy," Lucy said, walking over to him. "How are you holding up?" "Okay, I guess." "My dad moved out last week." "That's really hard. Are you still planning to submit that story about the animal shelter for next month's paper?" Tommy's face brightened a little. "Yeah, I think so. You really think it's good enough?" "I think it's great. And I think writing about things you care about will help you get through this tough time." "Did writing help you?" Tommy asked. "When you were going through bad stuff?" "It saved my life," Lucy said honestly. "It helped me figure out who I really was underneath all the pain." As the graduation ceremony began, Lucy sat with her classmates feeling a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. The principal introduced her as the valedictorian, and she walked to the podium with her heart beating fast. Looking out at the audience, she saw Daniel and Helen in the third row, both beaming with pride. For a moment she thought about her father, and wondered if he even knew she was graduating. She had heard through Helen's network of town gossip that he had moved away after getting into more legal trouble. Surprisingly, the thought didn't hurt anymore. She had learned that family wasn't about blood relations or legal obligations. Family was about the people who showed up for you, who believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. 2 years ago, Lucy began her speech, I thought my life was over before it had really begun. I believed I was worthless, unwanted, and had nothing to offer the world. She told her story without going into traumatic details, focusing instead on the journey of healing and discovery. She talked about finding her voice through writing, about the importance of having adults who believe in young people, and about the power of community support. Sometimes the family that raises you isn't the family that saves you, she said, looking directly at Daniel and Helen. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to accept love from unexpected places. She concluded by encouraging her classmates to be that unexpected source of love for someone else, to look for the kids who were struggling and offer them friendship and support. The audience erupted in applause, and Lucy saw several people wiping away tears. As she walked back to her seat, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had used her voice to make a difference, just like Daniel had always said she could. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Lucy found herself surrounded by classmates and teachers offering congratulations. Several people asked for copies of her speech, and one parent asked if she would consider speaking at other schools about her experiences. I'd love to, Lucy said. If my story can help even one kid realize they're worth saving, then everything I went through was worth it. That evening, the three of them sat on the front porch of the cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Lucy was heading to college in the fall, but she would be back for holidays and summers. This would always be home. Daniel, Lucy said suddenly, do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on a damaged kid instead of living your quiet mountain life? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the peaceful landscape. Lucy, you weren't damaged. You were hurt, and there's a big difference. Damaged things can't be fixed, but hurt things can heal. And you healed beautifully, Helen added. More importantly, you're going to help other hurt kids heal too. Lucy smiled, thinking about her future plans. She would study social work and learn how to help children in crisis. She would write articles and maybe even a book about her experiences. She would be the adult she had needed when she was 16. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "Thank you," Daniel replied, "for letting us be part of your story." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lucy realized that her life hadn't really begun the day she was born or even the day she was sold. It had begun the day someone decided she was worth saving, and she had decided to believe them.